Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're taking a look at Lee Jae-yong. He's a really towering figure in South Korean business.
Absolutely. Chairman of Samsung Group, Samsung Electronics, huge influence.
Right. And we've gathered information mainly drawing from his Wikipedia entry, actually, to try and understand his story better.
Yeah, the goal is really to unpack the key moments, his career path, and of course the controversies too. They're a big part of the picture.
Definitely.
Mhm.
We want to give you a clear, sort of insightful understanding of his role and, well, his impact on the global economy.
Exactly. Go beyond just the headlines, Give you that concise but still comprehensive view of why he's such a pivotal figure.
Okay, so let's dive in. Lee Jae-yong, born 1968, Washington, D.C., interestingly enough.
Oh, really? D.C.?
Yeah, but his story, I mean, it really starts with the family, doesn't it?
It has to. Grandson of Lee Byung-chul.
The founder of Samsung.
Right. And son of Lee Kun-hee.
The one who really transformed Samsung into the global giant we know today.
Exactly. So being born into that family, one of South Korea's most influential,
Yeah.
well, that sets the stage immediately.
And his education is pretty significant, too. He studied at Seoul National University, East Asian history, I believe.
Then an MBA from Keio University in Japan.
And he also attended Harvard Business School. For doctoral studies, though, apparently he didn't quite finish the program there.
That's interesting, that mix. Deep Korean roots, history background, but then this international business education.
Yeah, you wonder how that blend, shapes his leadership approach for such a global company.
Having that local context plus the global perspective, it must be a unique kind of advantage, or maybe challenge sometimes.
He officially joined Samsung back in 1991.
Okay, so quite early on.
And then later, 1998, he married Lim Se-ryung. Her father is chairman of Daesang Group, another major Korean conglomerate.
Right. So another powerful family connection there.
They had 2 children, a son and a daughter, but the marriage ended in 2009. What seemed like it might be a contested divorce actually ended up as an agreement. The lawsuit was withdrawn.
With these high-profile families, even personal matters like divorce get a lot of public attention, don't they?
He really do.
And it ties into that whole picture of the Chaebols in South Korea, these huge family-run conglomerates.
Yeah, the Chaebol.
Their leaders' personal and professional lives are just intensely scrutinized. It's all kind of woven together with the company's image.
So let's track his rise within Samsung itself. He didn't just appear at the top, right?
No, definitely not.
Started in Samsung Electronics in 2001 in management planning, then moved up steadily.
What were the steps?
Managing director in 2003, executive VP 2007, chief operating officer in 2009.
Okay. COO?
Then president in 2010, vice chairman in 2012.
Right. A clear progression.
Until finally in 2022, he formally became the chairman of Samsung Electronics and effectively the 3rd generation leader of the whole Samsung Group.
That kind of step-by-step advancement,
Mm-hmm.
it feels very deliberate, like a long grooming process for the top job.
Yeah, typical succession planning in these big family businesses, I suppose.
Each step meaning more responsibility, getting deeper into the complexities of this, massive organization.
Okay, but here's a really interesting detour almost. His early venture into the internet business, Samsung.
Ah, yes, Samsung.
Late 90s.
Exactly. Right at the peak of the dot-com bubble. And as the heir apparent, he got significant backing. Resources, people, everything from the Samsung Group.
A lot riding on it, presumably.
You'd think so. But by the early 2000s, it was widely seen as a failure.
Really? Despite all that support?
Yeah. Despite the investment, key personnel pulled from other Samsung affiliates,
Yeah.
it just didn't hit its goals.
That's fascinating. What does that tell us, maybe?
Well,
I mean, even with the might of Samsung behind it, innovating in a totally new space like the early internet,
yeah.
it shows the hurdles, right?
Definitely. It makes you question if the structure and maybe the culture of a giant traditional company are always suited for that kind of agile, risky tech venture. Yeah, it's almost like the classic innovator's dilemma. Successful companies sometimes struggle with disruptive tech because it might threaten their existing business.
That's a great point. The potential clash between the old structures and, well, the demands of something totally new.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we kind of have to shift gears. We need to talk about the legal challenges and the controversies. They've been a pretty consistent theme.
Yeah, you can't really discuss his career without getting into those. It's unavoidable.
Let's try and outline the key ones. Starting around, say, 2015, the merger of Samsung C&T and Child Industries.
Right. And the related allegations about accounting fraud at Samsung Biologics.
So the core accusation was What exactly?
Basically, that the value of Samsung C&T was deliberately pushed down, while Chile Industries' value was inflated.
How? Through accounting practices at its subsidiary, Samsung Biologics?
That was the allegation, yes. And the alleged motive, to benefit Lee Jae-yong himself.
Because he was a major shareholder in Chile Industries.
Precisely, making the merger terms more favorable for him.
So this led to investigations. An arrest warrant was requested but initially rejected.
But eventually, he was indicted on those charges.
It's important to grasp why this stuff matters, isn't it?
Absolutely. These kinds of allegations strike right at the heart of, well, corporate governance, financial market integrity.
If you're accused of manipulating company values just to benefit a controlling shareholder.
It shakes investor confidence. It's damaging to the whole business environment, potentially.
Okay, then more recently, around 2021, a different kind of issue. Propofol use.
Ah, yes. The charges about using propofol, which is a controlled anesthetic, outside of legitimate medical reasons.
And he was convicted for that, right? Fined for multiple instances.
He was. It brought a very different kind of scrutiny, more focused on his personal conduct.
It just shows the intense spotlight these figures are under, doesn't it?
Totally. Even personal legal troubles can really impact their public image, and by extension, the company's reputation.
Now let's rewind a bit further, back to the mid-1990s, the Samsung Everland convertible bonds controversy.
Okay, this one is often cited as crucial for his control consolidation.
The details are, well, quite complex. While he was an executive also studying in Japan, reports say he got a large sum of money from his father, and allegedly, with help from key Samsung executives, he bought shares in unlisted Samsung affiliates, Eson, Samsung Engineering.
At very low prices, before they went public.
That's the allegation. And then, when they were listed, he apparently made substantial profits.
So the core issue there is fair access, right?
Yeah.
How does someone with insider connections get these potentially lucrative investments that others can't?
Exactly. It raises those fundamental questions about, equitable wealth building and maybe abusing privileged information.
Within these huge conglomerates.
And it gets even more specific with the Everland convertible bonds themselves in 1996.
Right, the convertible bonds, or CBs.
These bonds, which could be turned into stock later, were supposedly issued at a really low price, like 7,701 per share.
Even though internal valuations suggested they might be worth much more.
Correct. And crucially, the existing shareholders, including other Samsung companies, reportedly waived their rights to buy these bonds.
They passed on them, allowing him to buy them instead.
Through what's called a third-party allocation. Yeah, that's the claim.
And that purchase was key, wasn't it? For cementing his control over the whole Samsung group.
Widely seen as such, through that complex web of cross-shareholdings, the circular ownership structure.
Where company A owns part of B, B owns part of C, C owns part of A.
Right. With Everland, now Samsung C&T's resort division, sort of at the center, allowing the family to control the whole empire with a relatively small direct stake.
That's such a critical point for understanding how these cables actually work, how control is maintained.
Yeah, acquiring those potentially undervalued Everland bonds gave him a really pivotal spot in that whole structure.
A characteristic feature of how these families wield control over vast business empires.
Which then brings us inevitably to a huge political scandal. The Park Geun-hye Soon-sil scandal.
Right. And Lee Jae-yong got drawn right into the center of that.
His involvement led to a special prosecutor's investigation starting in 2017.
There were arrest warrant requests. The first one denied, but a second one was issued.
Yeah, ultimately leading to his arrest. The charges were very serious: bribery, embezzlement, perjury.
The core allegation relating to him was that Samsung provided huge sums of money, basically.
To entities linked to Choi Soon-sil, President Park's close confidant.
Exactly. And the prosecution argued this was a quid pro quo, money in exchange for favorable government decisions for Samsung.
Specifically relating to that controversial merger we talked about earlier, C&T and Chile.
That was the prosecution's central argument, yes.
So the first trial resulted in a 5-year prison sentence.
It did. But then came the appeal.
And the appeal trial outcome was quite different. Reduced sentence, suspended jail term, he was released.
Right. And the court's reasoning there was really significant.
They found that the support given to Choi Soon-sil was
coerced, at least partly, yes. That it was provided under pressure or coercion from President Park herself. And that changed the legal view on the bribery charges.
That idea of coerced bribery, that became a huge point of debate, didn't it?
A massive one. The court basically said, Yes, Samsung gave the money, but the pressure from the top played a real role, which legally changed how they classified those actions.
And the reaction to that appeal verdict, it was completely split.
Sharply divided. Media, political figures, more conservative outlets maybe saw it as vindication, saying the prosecutor's case wasn't fully proven.
While more progressive voices heavily criticized it, concerns about leniency for powerful figures, fairness of the justice system.
It really just threw into sharp relief that ongoing debate in South Korea about the Chaebols, their power, their accountability. Is there a level playing field in the justice system?
The public reaction was intense, too. There was that petition demanding an audit of the appeal judge, Jung Hyung-sik.
He got over 200,000 signatures, right? Which required an official response.
Yeah, from the presidential Blue House. They said they couldn't intervene with judges directly, but they did forward the petition to the Supreme Court.
And the Korean Bar Association also weighed in.
Yeah.
Worried about judicial independence.
Exactly. Warning that kind of public pressure could undermine the judiciary. It highlights that tension, between public anger and the principles of an independent legal system.
It's also worth noting, the special prosecutor, Park Young-soo, faced some criticism, too, for supposedly changing the indictment against Lee multiple times.
Like adding new theories, like a zero meeting with the president, or a preliminary charge of third-party bribery.
Yeah, those changes led to questions about, well, the clarity and consistency of the prosecution's case throughout the whole process.
Okay, so moving past these really significant, complex legal battles, what about his actual leadership, his business decisions at Samsung?
Well, he did serve as a special envoy during the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit.
That's interesting. A business leader taking on that kind of diplomatic role.
It really shows the kind of influence these Chaebol leaders can have in Korea, sometimes acting as key players in national or even international initiatives.
And as we said, he formally took the chairman role at Samsung Electronics in 2022, solidifying his position.
Marking that definitive leadership transition at Samsung's helm.
Right. And finally, just briefly touching on those family connections again.
Always important in this context.
His parents, Lee Kun-hee and Hong Ra-hee, his siblings Lee Boo-jin at Hotel Shilla, Lee Seo-hyun at Samsung Welfare Foundation.
And his late younger sister, Lee Yoon-young.
Yeah. And the extended family is significant, too. His aunt, Lee Myung-hee, chairwoman of Shinsegae Group, his maternal uncle, Hong Sik-han, chairman of Jumang Group, a major media company.
It paints a picture of these incredibly powerful, interconnected networks across South Korean business and media.
Understanding those ties is pretty essential to grasping the whole landscape, isn't it?
Absolutely. How influence flows, the interconnected interests across different industries.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up our deep dive into Lee Jae-yong.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, his education, that early Samsung stumble, his climb through the ranks, and then these major legal and ethical challenges he's faced.
Hopefully listeners have a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture now of his background and the really complex world he operates in.
What really stands out to you as a key takeaway from all this?
For me, maybe the sheer mechanics of control. How things like the Everland bond issue and the circular ownership structure work to maintain family dominance in these massive companies. It's quite intricate. What about you?
I think for me, maybe two things. One is just the scale of wealth potentially generated by those early pre-IPO stock deals. It's staggering. And the other is that whole coerced bribery argument in the Park scandal. That interplay of power, pressure, obligation. It really makes you think.
Yeah, the legal nuances there were fascinating. And as you mentioned earlier, the Samsung failure is also a good reminder that even with endless resources, innovation isn't guaranteed.
Right. So for everyone listening, hoping to get knowledge quickly but also thoroughly, we've tried to structure this complex story, bring in specifics, hoping to give you those aha moments without getting totally bogged down.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with.
Okay. Considering everything the controversies, his eventual rise to chairman, what does Lee Jae-yong's journey really tell us about power dynamics, about succession, about corporate responsibility, specifically within South Korea's Chaebol system?
That's a big question. And looking forward, given his past experiences, what might the future hold for Samsung under his leadership? Where does he take it from here?
Exactly. Definitely something to ponder as you keep exploring the world of global business and leadership.